censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Yes, good morning, everybody. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick Christie's, and Mercy Muroki on your TV, radio and online. Huge show coming your way today, all the way through until midday.
Yes, and we'd love to hear your views. We've got lots coming up, and of course, it's the Queen's birthday as well, so cause for celebration. Get in touch with your views. GBviews at gbnews.uk will be getting to those very shortly. But first, let's give you the latest headlines.
Good morning. It's 1 minute past 10. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. The government's attempting to delay a vote over a possible investigation into whether Boris Johnson misled Parliament about lockdown parties. MPs were due to vote in the Commons later today, but ministers now say it should wait until after the Met Police and civil servant Sue Gray have finished their inquiries. The Prime Minister was fined by police for breaching COVID rules at a party in June 2020. He's since apologised. Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting told GB News the Prime Minister should have gone by now.
He stood up in the House of Commons this week and claimed that this is a government that's committed to low taxes. We've got the highest tax burden in Britain in 70 years, and Boris Johnson's increased taxes on working people. So it's not just on parties where Boris Johnson twists the truth, it's on a whole range of issues. And Boris Johnson can't be the solution facing our country's problems because he's part of the problem himself.
Well, Education Secretary Nadhim Zahawi told GB News he thinks the Labour Party should focus on other issues.
I have to say, the Labour Party are in danger of being perceived of playing politics with this. Keir Starmer was so enthusiastic in attacking the Prime Minister on this and playing politics instead of focusing on the global battle against inflation, Putin in the Ukraine. But we shouldn't be playing politics with this. The right thing to do is to allow the police to complete their investigation, to have the Sue Gray report published, and then Parliament can decide if it refers this to the Privileges Committee, and that's what I'll be voting for today.
Well, the Prime Minister won't be in the Commons for the vote today. He's in India on a two-day trade visit to strengthen ties with the country. He'll hold talks with his counterpart Narendra Modi tomorrow. Mr Johnson says he hopes a free trade agreement with the country can be reached by the end of the year. He also indicated he'll raise concerns about India becoming increasingly reliant on Russian fuel. That as Vladimir Putin says he will spare the lives of Ukrainian soldiers who are holed up in the Azovstal plant in Mariupol. It's amid warnings the besieged port city could fall to Moscow today. President Putin says he'll order the Russian military to cancel plans to storm the plant and for it to be securely blockaded instead. In an address, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky said he's working 24/7 to secure more support for the country.
The situation in the east and south remains extremely harsh. The occupiers are attempting with their new massive attack to snatch at least some kind of victory, at least something that they could feed to their propaganda peddlers. My heartfelt thanks goes to every defender of ours, to our armed forces, to our cities, to our communities who are repelling the invaders.
Volodymyr Zelensky. Staying with Ukraine, a military think tank says Russia didn't make any major breakthroughs in its offensive in the eastern regions yesterday. The Institute for the Study of War said Moscow only secured minor gains, including parts of some frontline towns. That as the Ministry of Defence warns the Kremlin could be stepping up its offensive ahead of their 9th of May Victory Day celebrations. Ukraine's military spokesman said troops managed to stop a number of Russian attacks overnight.
In the Donetsk and Tavria directions, the enemy continues to carry out artillery shelling along the entire line of contact. In the Kherson region, the invaders plan to organise the forced mobilisation of the population for war with Ukraine. At the same time, the occupiers set a goal to completely stop the humanitarian support of the region from the Ukrainian authorities.
To France, President Emmanuel Macron and his opponent Marine Le Pen faced each other last night in their only pre-election debate. Mr Macron accused the far-right leader of a desire to pull France out of the EU. Ms Le Pen responded defending her stance on religion and pledging to improve French people's finances. Voters will take to the polls this Sunday. The Children's Commissioner says smacking children should be banned in England. Dame Rachel de Souza wants the law changed to ensure children and adults share the same protection from assault. The change would bring the law in line with Scotland and Wales. Northern Ireland is also yet to ban smacking. And to celebrate the Queen's 96th birthday today, a new photo has been released. Taken last month in the grounds of Windsor Castle, Her Majesty is pictured with two of her white fell ponies. The monarch is in Sandringham, staying at a cottage loved by her late husband, the Duke of Edinburgh. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, it's back to Patrick and Mercy with To The Point.
Very good morning to you all. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Moroki, and Patrick Christie's on your TV, radio and online. We've got another great show lined up for you to kickstart your day. Here's what's on the menu.
Right, well, it's day 57 of the invasion of Ukraine, and Russia has test-launched a nuclear-capable missile, with Vladimir Putin boasting that it will give his country's enemies food for thought. Now, the war shows no sign of de-escalating, of course. We'll be crossing live to Ukraine shortly to speak to a British man who's transporting women and children from some of the more inaccessible areas towards safer regions. So a good soul, really.
Yes, and the police watchdog over here, back at home in Britain, has found ethnic minorities are unfairly targeted by police. The Independent Office for Police Conduct said the police need to end the overuse of controversial stop and search methods and implement guidelines to guard against racial bias. Obviously, a very controversial topic there. Should be a very good discussion. We'll get into that later.
Yes, do you think stop and search is racist? Let us know. But moving on, the Queen will celebrate her 96th birthday today at a cottage in Sandringham, where Prince Philip spent much of his retirement. This also coincides, get this, with National Tea Day. So we'll be joined, right, by a former royal butler to get the latest on the Queen's planned celebrations and for a special tutorial in how to make the best cup of tea.
Yeah, and isn't that the best picture ever? I mean, anybody who's listening to us on radio, the picture with the two horses that's been released, I believe it was taken in March, with the Queen in between. I think I might put that on my screensaver on my laptop.
Resplendent horses.
Yeah, beautiful picture, isn't it? Well, that's all coming up and much more as well across the next 2 hours. And remember, get in touch with your views. We love to hear them. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now, the Ukrainian Air Force has more aircraft today than it did 3 weeks ago, thanks to a recent influx of spare parts. That's according to US officials. It forms part of Ukraine's continued resistance to Russia's attack, particularly in the besieged city of Mariupol. But President Zelensky warns it's not enough to defeat the Russians entirely.
Yeah, meanwhile, food and medical supplies are dwindling, apparently, for the civilians still trapped in Ukraine. But one British man is seeking to do something to help his former MP. Former MP and Minister Brooks Newmark, who sent us this video from Poland.
We're at a warehouse at the moment in Warsaw, and we're bringing primarily medicines across the border to Ukraine, but we're also bringing some protective equipment and boots for the soldiers. And we're filling up the car, and then our intention is to cross the border, go to Lviv, and then deliver both the medicines, the boots, and possibly some body armor as well for the soldiers.
Well, when we last spoke with him over a week ago, Brooks had helped move about 6,400 women and children to safety. Now he says he's helped more, over 1,000 more, in fact, to move as well. Well, Brooks joins us now, we're pleased to say, from just outside Ivano-Frankivsk in western Ukraine, and he heads towards Vinnytsia in the country's centre. Good morning. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time. our breakfast team earlier was speaking to a mother who luckily managed to flee from somewhere in Ukraine, I think it was the capital, Kiev, with her daughter. She had to write her daughter's name and her phone number on her daughter's skin, on her back, because she was so worried that something bad might happen and they wouldn't be able to trace her. And she was saying, you know, people are still in Ukraine, starving to death there. Can you just give us a picture, paint a picture for us of what it actually is like on the ground for the people who are desperate there?
Yes, I mean, I've seen obviously several refugee camps, but the bigger problem with many people is the trauma. So one of the orphanages that I went to visit, there were, I think, about 85 children that had been moved from an orphanage in northern Ukraine to safety. And they'd been moved to a church. When I spoke to the priest, I said, how were the children? And he said, well, for 2 to 3 days, they didn't speak. The first day they arrived, they sort of gorged themselves so much because they hadn't eaten. They then, unfortunately were sick. And then they were so frightened they wouldn't get food anymore. They were stuffing food in their pockets. And it took them about 3 or 4 days to sort of get over that. I've just now been to a children's hospital where about 150 children and premature babies have been moved from Kharkiv to where I am. And, they too have been subject to trauma. I think that, part of the problem obviously is the amount of bombing now that's going on, especially in the east. And that's where I'm heading now towards Kharkiv. So my objective now, I'm working with a couple of bus companies here. We've moved over 7,500 women and children, plus about 140 orphans. There's actually in Kharkiv a children's center for disabled children, and there's 400 children there. So my objective really in the next 4 to 5 days is to get out to Kharkiv and to get enough buses to make sure we can move the children to safety from Kharkiv to probably Lviv initially, and then hopefully, out of Ukraine to somewhere safe, perhaps even the UK.
Yeah, and this problem's presumably going to get worse before it gets better, Brooks, and you're obviously, should be commended massively for what it is that you're doing. I think a knighthood awaits, no doubt, but I'm sure that's not why you're doing it, obviously. But, I mean, what kind of stories are you hearing about are you hearing any stories about the way that the Russian troops are behaving? Because that might dispel a lot of myths.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can't remember if I told you the story last week, but I met a woman from Mariupol. And she said, when the Russian soldiers sort of broke in her door, they were shouting, "Where are the Nazis? Where are the Nazis?" And she's saying, like, what are you talking about? There are no Nazis here. We've obviously heard stories of rape, that, rape as a weapon of war, which, I certainly saw in Syria 10 years ago, has continued here. This is something the Russian troops are doing. There's this story that, you may have also heard, where there were 25 women between 14 and 40 who were held in a basement. The Russian soldiers went about raping them several times and were saying, "We hope we rape you so much that you will not want to have any more Ukrainian babies." If this is not genocide, then what is? Rape is a weapon of war. Rape is also a weapon of genocide.
I'm speechless because the lack of humanity we've seen displayed by some people is just staggering. I mean, I've seen mothers and partners of Russian soldiers encouraging them to actually commit rapes and sexual assaults against other women, which is unimaginable to me. But let's just go back a little bit and talk about why you decided to get into this. What were your motivations and how long have you actually been there now helping out?
Well, I've been out here on and off really since the third day of the war. I did come back for Easter for 4 days. The reason why is because my family's also hosting a mother and daughter from Kiev. The mother's a pediatric nurse. So they're now with my family in our house. But really my motive is, wherever, people need help, have always felt an urge to do that. I've been involved in Rwanda now for 14 years. I got engaged with what was going on in Syria. I'm now a member of the International Commission for Missing Persons panel of experts. I've said to them, I'd very much like to take the lead on helping identify missing persons here in Ukraine, because we've already heard stories of mass burials here by the Russian soldiers. And as you've said, this is really only the beginning of the war. I suspect Putin may well try and say on May the 9th, his May Day, that he's achieved his goal, but really he won't. That's really the beginning of the war, because then there'll be a massive counterinsurgency that'll be responded to with more bombing on civilian areas. Bombing on civilian areas then will drive more women and children, again, out of the country. And I think I'm here for as long as I'm needed to try and take women and children to safety as best that I can by bus, because they will start, as we've seen, attacking train stations, train lines, and the best way, quickest way to move people out to safety will be through buses. And I've got a good network now of buses here in Ukraine, in Lviv, in Kyiv, in Vinnytsia, in Zaporizhia, in Kharkiv, and in Dnipro. Those are all the cities I've been working in. And as I said, over the next 5 days, I'm going out to Kharkiv to see how I can get out these 400 children with disabilities and move them to safety, or relative safety, I'll say, to Lviv.
Well, I mean, it sounds like the world's a much better place for having you in it, Brooks, I must say. But look, you brought up Rwanda there, and I was actually going to ask you about this anyway. And it ties in with what's going on in Ukraine. Yesterday, I did quite a big piece on our asylum seeker hotels and the way that now the Home Office is going to essentially bid alongside local authorities for private rental stock. The overbearing notion there is, of course, that there'll be, I suppose, fewer homes for people who are already vulnerable in this country, but also potentially now, because these asylum seeker hotels are basically people who've come across the channel, potentially fewer spaces for Ukrainians. How do you feel about our Rwanda scheme in that context, Brooks?
Well, I think, look, I've spent 14 years in Rwanda. I've got an education charity based there. I've got a school, primary school for 300 children there. Out of perhaps most countries in Africa, it is one of the more modern, progressive, economically improving countries certainly in Central Africa, if not Africa as a whole. I think and I believe that if refugees are taken there, or when they're taken there, they will be treated well. I don't believe necessarily they will displace places that might already exist for current Rwandans. There's a huge amount of building going on there, incredible amount of building as they've developed all around Kigali. They're trying to rejuvenate the capital of the city. As you may well be aware, you'll probably be talking more about this in June, because the Commonwealth heads of government are going to be held in Kigali in the last week of June. So, I've been here, so I haven't really been reading the stories other than the headline that there will be refugees being taken to Rwanda. And, I'm not going to particularly comment on the pluses and minuses of that, other than to give my judgment of Rwanda as a place to settle. And I'm also building a house there because I like it so much. It is a great country. It's a progressive country. It's economically booming. And I think it's certainly, if you're going there, they will have lots of opportunities to work.
Well, look, you're doing incredible work. I can't say enough kind words about what you're doing. And on that note, if anybody at home who's watching or listening wants to get involved in what you're doing and perhaps offer their time and support your efforts or the efforts of anyone else who's helping in Ukraine, how can they do that?
Well, I think, it's difficult here. That's the reason why I'm on the ground. It does take a bit of legwork to try and persuade people. I mean, it's sort of difficult getting the bus drivers, for example, to go to Kharkiv. So I feel if I'm physically going there, they may not be so concerned to actually go there and help take away the children I'm trying to move at the moment. But I think, Britain, I think more than any other country in Ukraine, is hugely respected. And I think, and notwithstanding, and I heard your introduction with your last piece on Partygate and everything, but in terms of foreign policy particularly, Boris Johnson is second to Zelensky in terms of popularity in this country. I think even in Odessa, they've named a street after him. So the Brits come across well. Every time I say I'm from Britain, people want to shake my hands. They say thank you. And I think what people have been doing in the UK, number one, I think in welcoming refugees is brilliant. Number two, there's been a huge amount of clothing, nappies, and so on that have been sent to Ukraine. They greatly appreciate that. I think one thing from my hospital visit they particularly need are things like insulin, that I think is important. But I think overall, I think just do whatever you think you can. Even having a coffee morning, raising some money for Ukraine will be great.
Absolutely. Look, Brooks, thank you very, very much. And you're doing tremendous work. You're a credit to yourself and indeed this country. Keep up the good work. Brooks Newmont there. You also, can I say, a credit second only to the person who's been holding your camera throughout all of this. Much appreciated to you both. So thank you very, very much.
Yes,
Brooks Newmont, who's helped save thousands, really, of people and get them safety, mostly women and children.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we're going to be speaking about lots more after the break. That was a fantastic interview. You did great work. But after the break, we will be talking about a police watchdog which says ethnic minorities are unfairly targeted by stop and search. Very controversial, this. The practice has been considered controversial for some time, and the report comes, of course, as the Metropolitan Police face a crisis of public trust. We'll be back with more after the break.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest broadcast from the Met Office. Mostly dry on Thursday, plenty of sunshine, but the breeze increasing over the next 24 hours or so. The reason for the settled weather at the moment: low pressure to the south of the UK, high pressure to the north, an easterly flow developing, drawing in quite a lot of dry air at the moment, but we will see changes as we move into the weekend. For Thursday afternoon, plenty of sunshine across the whole of the UK. It will be hazy at times. The easterly breeze just starting to pick up, so noticeable along some eastern coast. Perhaps some low cloud mist and murk holding on across some eastern coast of northeast England here too. Temperatures pegged back 11, 12, 13 degrees. But come further west, temperatures rising 19, 20 Celsius possible, well above average for the time of year. Moderate UV levels too. Through the evening time, some mist and fog starts to develop in one or two spots. Low cloud moving back in off the North Sea down the east coast here, so turning murky as the night goes on. That easterly wind also starting to pick up, becoming noticeable by the end of the night. Temperatures generally into mid-single figures, towns and cities holding up well above freezing. So a fresh start to Friday morning. A dry, bright start for many, though low cloud across some eastern areas. The southeast seeing some thicker cloud, this pushing its way westwards through the morning into the afternoon. It should break up, however, we will see showers develop here too. One or two of these could be heavy as they move into the West Country, though the Midlands northwards, plenty more sunshine to come. Some low cloud around the coast, keeping it cooler across northeast Scotland, eastern England, but elsewhere temperatures again high teens, well above average. Through the evening we should start to see the showers fade away across southwest England. Elsewhere generally dry, though notice again some low cloud moving in off the North Sea later on, and that will set us up for the weekend itself. Cloudy for many, the risk of a few showers, the best of the sunshine in the east where we'll see the highest temperatures.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question.
That's two questions, actually. That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christys.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Yes, good morning, everybody. It's nearly 10:26. This is To The Point with me, Patrick Christys, and Mercy Moroki on GB News, live on your TV, online and radio this morning.
Yes, now, something that's quite controversial we've spoken about before on this show, stop and search. And a new report from the Independent Office for Police Conduct has found that ethnic minorities are unfairly targeted by police through stop and search, which is the power given to police to search any person or vehicle if they have reasonable grounds to suspect the person is carrying drugs or weapons.
Well, searches have fallen significantly, apparently, since the 2009 peak, when 1.5 million searches took place in England and Wales. Well, since then, the number has roughly halved. In the year ending March 2021, people from a black or black British background were 7 times more likely, apparently, to be stopped and searched than those from a white ethnic background.
Well, the report cited the case of a child who was stopped and searched over 60 times between the ages of 14 and 16. Well, joining us now for an expert view on this important issue is Ken Hines, former chair of Haringey's Independent Stop and Search Monitoring Group. Hi, Ken, thanks for joining us. Look, I can't help but think, if I had a 14-year-old son, he certainly wouldn't be getting stopped and searched 60 times over the course of 2 years. What this tells me is, aren't the police right to stop and search some people? Because they do have to have reasonable grounds. And at the end of the day, there are victims, many victims, are young black men themselves. So we have to put the victims first and stop worrying about offending people carrying knives.
Yes, but I totally agree that the police have there's certain times the police should be stopping and searching people, and that's primarily to allay any suspicion that the person has committed an offence or has something of note that's like a weapon on them. But once that interaction has been, that fear has been allayed, they're supposed to stop and end the encounter in a good way. What this report highlights quite clearly is a systemic failure in all aspects of stop and search. Yes, and my thing is simply this, is that we have been, in the black community, have been complaining for decades about the unfairness and the biasness around stop and search, particularly towards young black men. Now we're even finding young black women being caught up in this vice as well, which is unacceptable.
Yeah, OK, what's the solution, Ken? You know, look, I hear what you're saying. You know, I've got old man's, but I've never been stopped and searched. I don't think that's necessarily just because I'm white, though, to be fair. But what is the solution, Ken?
Look, I think the report highlights a lot of the solution. It's, again, if we need to have a serious conversation about the effectiveness of stop and search. We're told stop and search is good for getting weapons off our street, but the police themselves tells you that every month they do around about 20,000 stops and search, and they may find up to 300 weapons. That represent 1.5% of the stop and search. So my thing is that we've got to find a better way of getting a positive outcome.
You say only 300 knives off the street, 1.5%, that figure you quote. But to me, that's 300 knives that would have otherwise been on the street, which may go on to kill multiple people. So actually, I don't see this as a case of only 300 knives being taken off the street.
Well, I can say that because I'm also I'm the chair of the Harrogate Communities Against Violence, and we work with other groups like Fire and Poor, who takes many more knives off the street. Off of young people off the street, many more knives. And these people who we take knives off of, they're more unlikely to rearm themselves with a knife. Unlike when the police stops them. When the police stops them, they're saying they're carrying knives to safeguard themselves. Just because the police take the knives from them doesn't mean that they aren't going to rearm themselves. What those young people tell us is that they much prefer to be caught by the police with a knife on them than to be caught by their opposition without it. Because one of them will take them to be judged by 12 of their peers. The other could mean that they'll be carried to their grave by 6 of their peers.
I understand that. Look, just putting the other side of this up, Ken, you know, that's my job, really. I suppose you'd say everyone gets searched at airport security and they might only ever find one bomb, say, in every few years. I suppose something maybe that we would all accept. But could I ask, a lot of people watching this, Ken, right, would go, I could never imagine carrying a knife. I could never imagine. Don't want to sound too much like a former US president, but I would just say no. Right? What would your response be for that? Because some people would go, look, whatever your circumstances, the second you carry a knife and you go out there, whatever happens at that point on becomes your own fault.
Look, I as a young man, I used to carry a knife myself. So, and the thing is, I was well aware of stop and search. And each time I got stopped and searched, I never got found with a knife because I took actions that mean that you would never find the knife on me at that time. The young people are doing the same because I'm telling you this. Back in my days, we used to carry flick knives and smaller knives that we can hide quite easily. Nowadays, they're carrying zombie knives, Rambo knives, and swords in bigger quantities. And the police, the evidence are that the police are not taking these off our streets. What they are doing, they're stopping too many young people on the pretense of the smell of cannabis for personal possession. Cannabis is not the issue. Knives and guns are the issue.
Sorry, maybe I misunderstood, but I believe you just made a cracking case of stop and search, Ken, because you're saying that now people are walking around with zombie knives and swords. And for me, that's the case right there for why we should be stopping people, regardless of whether or not they happen to smell of cannabis, just in case, you know?
No, well, the evidence shows that even when they do stop them for cannabis and search them, they're not finding knives. So my thing is that you got to work with the community that is affected from knife crime much more effectively to find out who are carrying the knives so that we can better target them. I would prefer that if you have been convicted for carrying knives, that you should be repeatedly stopped to ensure that you're not carrying a knife. But what we're finding all too often, they are stopping ordinary young people going about their lawful business, and all they're doing is further alienating that very community that needs the support.
Just very quickly, Ken, would you defund the police?
Sorry?
Would you defund the police?
Not at all, but what I would do, I would have stronger accountability and transparency around stop and search and its effective use. That's what I would do.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Ken Hines, thank you so much. You've put your case forward very clearly there. Former chair of Harrogate's Independent Stop and Search Monitoring Group, very clearly, but somewhat confusingly, because I thought, if anything, he was making a case for stop and search. I mean, he was saying we need to get the knives off the streets. We need to find out who's carrying these knives. Well, yes, that's why you stop and search, so you can get an accurate sort of data on who's carrying the knives. If they're carrying machetes, I'd find it unlikely you wouldn't be able to find a machete or a sword upon searching somebody. But anyway, let us know what you think. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Lots of views coming in about this very subject already, so we'll get to those shortly. But after the break, it's Her Majesty the Queen's 96th birthday today. Yeah, we'll see what's happening to mark the occasion, and we'll be celebrating National Tea Day as well. Got mine here.
I'm a coffee man myself, but
disgraceful. But before that, I look at this morning's news.
It's 10:34. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. Boris Johnson says he wants MPs to have the full facts before they vote on whether he's to be investigated. The government's attempting to delay the vote into whether the Prime Minister misled Parliament about lockdown parties. MPs are due to vote in the Commons later today, but ministers now say it should wait until after the Met Police and civil servant Sue Gray have finished their inquiries. The Prime Minister was fined by police for breaching COVID rules at a party in June 2020 and has apologised. Boris Johnson won't be in the Commons for that vote today, as he's in India on a two-day trade visit to strengthen ties with the country. He'll hold talks with his counterpart Narendra Modi tomorrow. The Prime Minister says he hopes a free trade agreement with the country can be reached by the end of the year. Vladimir Putin says he'll spare the lives of Ukrainian soldiers who are holed up in the Azovstal plant in Mariupol. It's amid warnings the besieged port city could fall to Moscow today. President Putin says he'll order the Russian military to abandon plans to storm the plant and for it to be securely blockaded instead. In France, President Emmanuel Macron and his opponent Marine Le Pen faced each other last night in their only pre-election debate. Mr Macron accused the far-right leader of a desire to pull France out of the EU. Ms Le Pen responded defending her stance on religion and pledging to improve French people's finances. Votes will take place this Sunday. And a new photo has been released to celebrate the Queen's 96th birthday today. Taken last month in the grounds of Windsor Castle, Her Majesty's pictured with two of her white fell ponies. The monarch's ensanging them staying in a cottage loved by her late husband, the Duke of Edinburgh. TV Online and DAB Plus Radio, this is GB News. It's back to Patrick and Mercy with To The Point in just a moment. Don't go anywhere.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning, it's 10:38 and this is To The Point on with me, Mercy Moroki, and Patrick Christie's on GB News, live on your TV, online and of course on radio.
Yes, well, a British court yesterday approved the extradition of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange to the US, where he's wanted for his involvement in leaking of classified documents between 2010 and 2011. Now, the decision to extradite will ultimately fall to Home Secretary Priti Patel. She's not usually good at getting rid of people, is she? But anyway, she will have the final say. Yeah?
Yes, well, the WikiLeaks founder is expected to appeal to the High Court, unsurprisingly, if the Home Secretary Priti Patel does approve his extradition. Well, we can now go live to our GB News reporter, Rosie Wright, who's outside the prison Assange is currently being held in, which I believe is Belmarsh Prison. Rosie, just give us an update on what's happened over the last couple of days.
Yeah, this has been such an arduous case, hasn't it, with some quite extraordinary tactics from Assange and his legal team to prevent him being sent over to the United States to face charges there of espionage and also accusations that his actions put lives at risk. Well, yesterday, his barrister described it as what was a significant step forward. It's a step forward closer to extradition. As you mentioned, though, the case now lands on the desk of Priti Patel. She's got to decide whether that formal approval means, OK, that means he goes ahead. The problem is there are several other legal routes, and not a problem if you're Julian Assange's legal team, that they can explore. You mentioned there appealing to the High Court, but they could also take this all the way to the European Court of Human Rights if they wanted, and they've got various different strains of argument here. They're saying, look, Julian Assange actually himself is not in a physically and mentally fit state to leave. They're concerned about the conditions that he could be held in the US, the type of crimes that he could be facing there. He's got 2 young children and recently just got married. Their team, their defence has always been that this is politically motivated and actually that it was in the public interest that this information came clear. The next step, though, that they'll be watching for, and we are too, is what action Priti Patel might take.
Yes, indeed. No, absolutely. And can I ask, sorry, so is the final decision to this is down to Priti Patel? And sorry, unless I missed what you said there, I couldn't quite make out some of it. But do we know roughly when she might make this decision?
No idea. We'll have to wait and see. Of course, our relationship with the US right now, when we've got the war in Ukraine, might not be, I don't want to speak to Priti Patel's motives, but this might not be the time that she wants to go against something that the US so clearly want to go forward. And Julian Assange's team, they appealed to the Supreme Court in February of this year and said, please don't let this go through. They said no. That's why yesterday was, in effect, just a rubber stamping. It was only a 7-minute procedure. Julian Assange, who's staying behind me, only appeared on video camera to state his name, really. It was just an official sort of, as I said, rubber stamping the process that already had been sort of confirmed in February. He isn't a man without support, though. All around the prison here, there are sort of layers of this sort of yellow tape saying things like, you know, we've had different things here, free Assange, or this is for journalism. And there are high-profile celebrities and politicians who support Julian Assange. Quite famously, while he was staying holed up in the embassy, Vivienne Westwood came to visit him every single week. Jeremy Corbyn came yesterday outside the court, Westminster Magistrates Court, to say, no, we're going to carry on campaigning. Journalism is at the heart of this. But he is a character that hugely divides opinion. Someone who, on the one hand, is being heralded as this champion of free speech who's fundamentally changed journalism. On the other side, people are saying this man's a narcissist, potentially not very nice. Can we trust him? And is this actually about his ego rather than pursuing the truth?
Absolutely, Rosie. Look, thank you so much. Cracking report that. Rosie Wright there outside Belmarsh to report the latest from Julian Assange as he may be extradited. How do you feel about this? She raises a cracking point there, Rosie, I think, really, and it's something we touched on yesterday. You know, is Julian Assange this freedom-fighting journalist, or is he, I suppose, an activist? Has he done wrong? Where do you stand on this? GBNews.
Bit of a Marmite figure, isn't he? He's like a hero-villain dichotomy. Some people very much think what he did was correct. He was exposing the corrupt, US government or whatever. But some people think, actually, we were speaking to Mark White, our home and security editor, yesterday, and he was saying he absolutely isn't a journalist. He's an advocate, an activist, more than anything else.
It's interesting, actually. There's a place, actually not too far from where we're based here at the moment in Paddington, in London, called the Frontline Club, which is like a journalist's kind of club, as it were, and it's for war correspondents specifically. And Julian Assange has spoken there, and they do numerous talks there. And from what I can gather, anyway, having been to some of these talks, is that Julian Assange is very popular among the war correspondency community. They certainly seem to view him as a freedom-fighting journalist, which I think is quite telling, really, because a lot of his leaks, anyway, were about, I suppose, quotes and quotes, war crimes, weren't they? So that says a lot. But let's move on. Something a lot lighter now.
Yes. Well, it's Her Majesty the Queen's 96th birthday today. Her actual birthday rather than her official birthday.
Yes, two birthdays.
Which can be a bit confusing. She'll apparently be spending it at Sandringham today, where her husband, Prince Philip, spent much of his retirement.
Well, the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery and the Honourable Artillery Company are expected to fire gun salutes at midday today in Hyde Park in London in honour of the occasion. And our royal reporter, Cameron Walker, has been looking back at her legacy.
Inevitably, a long life can pass by many milestones. My own is no exception.
Her Majesty the Queen, speaking in 2015 when she overtook her great-great-grandmother Queen Victoria as Britain's longest reigning monarch. This year, we celebrate her Platinum Jubilee, 70 years on the throne. Trooping the Colour is a large part of June's celebrations and has marked the official birthday of the British sovereign for more than 2 centuries. But today, we celebrate the Queen's actual birthday. 96 years ago, the then Princess Elizabeth was born, not in a palace, but in a townhouse. She wasn't expected to be Queen, but her uncle, King Edward VIII's sudden abdication to marry an American divorcee propelled Elizabeth up the line of succession.
I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service.
Even on her birthday, Her Majesty continues with duties and works through her daily red box of government papers. 14 British Prime Ministers have served her, as well as 15 Australian and 12 Canadians. She has advised and guided each of them through troubled times, while always knowing when to lighten the mood.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister of Canada, for making me feel so old.
This week, it reveals the Queen's corgis were an absolute joy for her during the coronavirus pandemic. Her Majesty's personal advisor, Angela Kelly, reveals in a new chapter of her book that the Queen often took her dogs on long walks and were a great comfort when her late husband, Prince Philip, was in hospital. Her Majesty's 2 corgi puppies, Mick and Sandy, were a present from the Queen's son, Prince Andrew, and his daughters, Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie. It's unknown what birthday presents are on offer this year, but Her Majesty is expected to mark the day privately.
Yes, I think the only person lovelier than the Queen is our royal reporter, Cameron, there. But anyway, right, now former royal butler Grant Harold joins us now. Thank you very much for that. Great to have you back on the show. So, a tremendous day. Now, look, you know better than most people. It does always crack me up, right? You go to people, you know, the usual types outside Buckingham Palace. And they go, what will the Queen be doing now? And they go, well, if I know the Queen like I know the Queen, which is not at all, she will be sitting down with her favourite corgi, Whisper, in front of the fire with a cup of tea. She always has it, 2 sugars. But you actually know the Queen, right? What will she be doing today?
Do you know, it's funny you say that. The amount of times I watch, you know, when other people are talking about the royal family and they say, well, I imagine she's doing this. And it always makes me smile because I was lucky enough to be there, to get to know her. And obviously I don't know every move and I've been gone for a few years now. But, you know, the thing about the Queen is with birthdays and things, they're very much family get-togethers. Traditionally, you should have the family round, but it's very much like any other day for her. She's very much a worker, and from my memory, she would carry on working. I remember her 80th birthday party, which I was actually at the palace, party in the gardens, for a few hundred of us. And before the party, she was working, and then she came out and joined us, you know, as you do. So it just shows you that the duty that she took on, she takes that before everything. That's the main thing for her.
No, absolutely. And do you think there'll be any kind of more sombre sense to this one, of course? Prince Philip, obviously, sadly not going to be there anymore. There's been a few scandals, to say the least, in the last year or so. What do you think she'll be feeling today?
I think it's a very different one because obviously Prince Philip's anniversary just passed and that's obviously a year, and he was very much her right-hand man. I mean, he was always with her for all occasions, birthdays, celebrations. This is obviously her second birthday without him there. And I believe that the Queen has become more, I've noticed she's changed. There's no question. I think everybody would agree. In fact, a lot of people say on my social media how she's changed in the last year. Obviously, she's slowed down. we've suddenly seen her with these kind of health issues with the walking, the mobility. I think it's just the reality is she is obviously getting older, which isn't bad for 96, and she is still working even at 96. But obviously she is kind of slowing down a little bit, and she has lost her husband, and it's been a really difficult couple of years for her, obviously with everything going on. So I think it's amazing that she's still going, and I think like everybody else, we're just hoping and praying that, like her mother, she gets to that 100th birthday. I'm hoping she does. I want to be at that party.
Yeah, here. Let's, long live the Queen, absolutely. Moving on to something somewhat related. It's National Tea Day today, Thursday the 21st. I believe you've actually done TikTok videos in the past telling people how to make the perfect cup of tea. So we're just going to have a little look at that video just now before we come back to you.
Ladies and gentlemen, when having your tea, remember we do not slurp, we sip, because you're not a drain being plumbed.
This is fantastic. So you're there, you're on the tea.
Do you have to have your little finger out?
Look, I've got my...
Well, it'll be bad for me. I've got arthritis in mine. It'll look all wonky. Look, I'm insulting him.
I've got the cup there. No, I keep, obviously, the pink in, and then a lot of people get confused with these kind of cups. They try to put their fingers through them, and then they get stuck, and it's a visit to E&E. All you've got to do is a little pinch. That's as simple as that. And the main thing you've got to remember when you're having your tea is that when it comes to the stirring, simple back and forward motion, no stirring in circular motions, because you're not creating a storm in a teacup, and always milk after, never before, because you're aristocracy.
Yeah, and
sorry, hang on a minute. You can't just lob things out because you're aristocracy. What does that mean? So because milk have to go on?
So basically, many years ago, in the big stately homes, in the royal homes, they had to put milk in first because those clay mugs could crack. And then when Spode invented, you put animal bone into the china, it meant that it wouldn't crack with the heat to the tea. So the aristocracy had the fine bone china, which meant they put the milk in after. So it became very much a status thing. But the thing that makes me smile, Patrick Messi, was I was giving this talk and I said about the animal bone. And there was one lady sitting at one of the tables and she was looking in her cup. And she looked very puzzled. So eventually I said to her, "Are you okay, madam?" And she said, "Well, not really." She said, "Because I can't actually see the animal bone."
So actually, to be fair, I feel sorry for taking the mickey now because you've just answered my question directly.
Can you also special this? Because I put on my Instagram not long ago a picture of a cup of tea I was having, and people were like, "Why is it so pale? How much milk have you put in there?" And I actually come from Kenya, where we about a third of the cup is milk, warm milk, which is how we think it's properly done in Kenya. And I see people put in a few drops in, and it makes me feel sick. So what is the proportion of milk to hot water you should have?
It's a really interesting one because everyone makes their tea differently. And when people ask me, I say, make it how you like it. There isn't actually a set rule. The only thing I will mention is that when it comes to the strength of the tea, so if you're using tea leaves or tea bags, people make the mistake of putting, well, somebody once said you put one in for every person. Well, that's ridiculous. If you get 6 people for tea and you put 6 tea bags in, that's going to be pretty strong tea. So I think the best thing is I would say a couple of tea bags, and then when it comes to pouring it, leave it for a few minutes. Then when you actually pour the tea, a drop of milk. But as you said, it depends on your preference. I quite like putting a bit of milk in my tea as well. So it's kind of what you prefer. The other thing to throw at your messy is I also like to add, I will obviously cover the label here, but I also like to add a little bit of honey to my tea, which is something that I know that Prince Charles also does as well. And it's obviously, if the royals do it, it's good enough for everyone else.
Absolutely. I mean, you've come equipped and you've come prepared as well. I'm also very jealous.
Everything.
Absolutely. Are they 4 lint bunnies on top of your microwave over there? Someone's had a good Easter.
They are 4 lint bunnies on the microwave.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, well,
can you tell my favourite chocolate?
Yes, well, you're a man of distinguished taste, so thank you very, very much. Really great to have you on the show. Former Royal Butler, Grant Harold, and an absolute legend. Look at that. It's fantastic.
Do you have tea usually?
No, coffee.
Yeah, I've never seen you have a cup of tea, I don't think.
I don't see the point. You don't get to bang your butt with a cup of tea.
How much milk would you have?
Oh, not a lot, really. I mean, I just have black coffee. So, I mean, I imagine no milk in the tea. I
get quite upset when people, make me a cup of tea. I mean, not upset. Inside I'm upset, but I do the English thing of...
We lost a floor manager that way, didn't we?
Thank you.
We lost a floor manager
and then just suffered through the tea.
Yeah, no, I mean, once there was some strong words had when an individual came into the studio with Mercy's cup of tea, and it was, well, let's say, not to her liking. But we've moved on.
I'm not a diva, though.
Well, he certainly has moved on. But anyway, right, let's go to some views. GB Views at GBnews.uk. Loads of you getting in touch about, well, all sorts, actually, especially the stop and search that we were talking about before.
Very popular in our inbox.
Yes, basically, the overwhelming consensus appears to be that stop and search, a lot of you guys think anyway, is certainly not racist. Why is it always the police who are to blame for everything, says David. Thank you very much.
Yeah, lots of you saying, why don't you speak to the parents of victims who have been stabbed by knives and see what they think, because many people are saying, I bet they wouldn't think that stop and search is the wrong strategy. We have an email from Anthony here who says, why can't people be honest and say that certain groups do carry knives, like certain groups groom young girls? I don't mind being stopped and searched personally because I have nothing to hide. That's Tony. And I think that's a fair point, isn't it? Because if an area is disproportionately black, if the crime in an area is disproportionately being committed by black kids, young people, then you would expect stop and search to reflect that.
I mean, I don't really see what the alternative is. I mean, obviously Ken Hines there, he's perfectly entitled to his views, don't get me wrong, and he keeps coming on the show, which is great, but he basically thinks, the community should take the lead. Well, if the community isn't taking the lead, you can't issue a directive to our police officers to not stop and search people in an area of high crime. And we've had an ex-police officer on, Dwight, thank you very much. As an ex-police officer, stop and search works, and that's good enough for me, Dwight. So there you go. Keep all your thoughts coming in to us on email, gbviews at gbnews.uk. We'll be back with more of today's top stories and, of course, plenty of your views after this break.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest broadcast from the Met Office. Mostly dry on Thursday, plenty of sunshine, but the breeze increasing over the next 24 hours or so. The reason for the settled weather at the moment, low pressure to the south of the UK, high pressure to the north, an easterly flow developing, drawing in quite a lot of dry air at the moment, but we will see changes as we move into the weekend. For Thursday afternoon, plenty of sunshine across the whole of the UK. It will be hazy at times. The easterly breeze just starting to pick up, so noticeable along some eastern coasts. Perhaps some low cloud mist and murk holding on across some eastern coast of northeast England here too. Temperatures pegged back 11, 12, 13 degrees. But come further west, temperatures rising 19, 20 Celsius possible, well above average for the time of year. Moderate UV levels too. Through the evening time, some mist and fog starts to develop in one or two spots. Low cloud moving back in off the North Sea down the east coast here, so turning murky as the night goes on. That easterly wind also starting to pick up, becoming noticeable by the end of the night. Temperatures generally into mid-single figures. Towns and cities holding up well above freezing. So a fresh start to Friday morning. A dry, bright start for many, though low cloud across some eastern areas. The southeast seeing some thicker cloud. This pushing its way westwards through the morning into the afternoon. It should break up. However, we will see showers develop here too. One or two of these could be heavy as they move into the West Country, though the Midlands northwards, plenty more sunshine to come. Some low cloud around the coast, keeping it cooler across northeast Scotland, eastern England, but elsewhere temperatures again high teens, well above average. Through the evening we should start to see the showers fade away across southwest England. Elsewhere generally dry, though notice again some low cloud moving in off the North Sea later on. And that will set us up for the weekend itself. Cloudy for many, the risk of a few showers, the best of the sunshine in the east where we'll see the highest temperatures.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christys.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning, everyone. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick Christys, and Mercy Moroki, on your TV, radio and online. And we've got loads coming your way for the next hour. Loads of discussion, expert guests and your opinions as well.
You've been getting in touch with lots of those opinions, so keep them coming in on our usual email, gbviews@gbnews.uk. But first, here's the headlines.
Good morning, it's 11 o'clock. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. Boris Johnson says he wants MPs to have the full facts before they vote if he's to be investigated whether he misled Parliament about lockdown parties. The government's attempting to delay the vote that's due to happen in the Commons later today. Ministers say it should wait until after the Met Police and civil servant Sue Gray have finished their inquiries. The Prime Minister was fined by police for breaching COVID rules at a party in June 2020 and has apologised. Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting told GB News the Prime Minister should have gone by now.
He stood up in the House of Commons this week and claimed that this is a government that's committed to low taxes. We've got the highest tax burden in Britain in 70 years, and Boris Johnson's increased taxes on working people. So it's not just on parties where Boris Johnson twists the truth, it's on a whole range of issues. And Boris Johnson can't be the solution facing our country's problems because he's part of the problem himself.
Well, Education Secretary Nadhim Zahawi told GB News he thinks the Labour Party should focus on other issues.
I have to say, the Labour Party are in danger of being perceived of playing politics with this. Keir Starmer was so enthusiastic in attacking the Prime Minister on this and playing politics instead of focusing on the global battle against inflation, Putin in the Ukraine. But we shouldn't be playing politics with this. The right thing to do is to allow the police to complete their investigation, to have the Sue Gray report published, and then Parliament can decide if it refers this to the Privileges Committee, and that's what I'll be voting for today.
Well, the Prime Minister won't be in the Commons for that vote today. He's in India on a two-day trade visit to strengthen ties with the country. He'll hold talks with his counterpart Narendra Modi tomorrow. Mr Johnson says he hopes a free trade agreement with the country can be reached by the end of the year. He also indicated he'll raise concerns about India becoming increasingly reliant on Russian fuel. To Ukraine, Vladimir Putin says he'll spare the lives of Ukrainian soldiers who are holed up in the Azovstal plant in Mariupol. It's amid warnings the besieged port city could fall to Moscow today. President Putin says he'll order the Russian military to cancel plans to storm the plant and for it to be securely blockaded instead. In an address, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky said he's working 24/7 to secure more support for the country.
The situation in the east and south remains extremely harsh. The occupiers are attempting with their new massive attack to snatch at least some kind of victory, at least something that they could feed to their propaganda peddlers. My heartfelt thanks goes to every defender of ours, to our armed forces, to our cities, to our communities who are repelling the invaders.
Staying with Ukraine, a military think tank says Russia didn't make any major breakthroughs in its offensive in the eastern regions yesterday. The Institute for the Study of War said Moscow only secured minor gains, including parts of some frontline towns. That, as the Ministry of Defence warns the Kremlin could be stepping up its offensive ahead of the 9th of May Victory Day celebrations. Ukraine's military spokesman said troops managed to stop a number of Russian attacks overnight.
In the Donetsk and Tavria directions, the enemy continues to carry out artillery shelling along the entire line of contact. In the Kherson region, the invaders plan to organise the forced mobilisation of the population for war with Ukraine. At the same time, the occupiers set a goal to completely stop the humanitarian support of the region from the Ukrainian authorities.
To France, President Emmanuel Macron and his opponent Marine Le Pen faced each other last night in their only pre-election debate. Mr. Macron accused the far-right leader of a desire to pull France out of the EU. Ms. Le Pen responded defending her stance on religion and pledging to improve French people's finances. Voters will take to the polls this Sunday. The Children's Commissioner says smacking children should be banned in England. Dame Rachel de Souza wants the law changed to ensure children and adults share the same protection from assault. The change would bring the law in line with Scotland and Wales. Northern Ireland is also yet to ban smacking. And to celebrate the Queen's 96th birthday today, a new photo has been released. Taken last month in the grounds of Windsor Castle, Her Majesty is pictured with two of her white fell ponies. The monarch's in Sandringham, staying at a cottage loved by her late husband, the Duke of Edinburgh. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's return to Patrick and Mercy with To The Point.
Good morning. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Moroki, and Patrick Christie's as well. We're on your TV, radio and online, and we're here for another hour with lots of topics to get stuck into. So here's what's coming up.
Right, well, Boris Johnson has arrived in India for the first time as Prime Minister after years of delays. The visit will aim to strengthen trade links, but the visit could be overshadowed by Labour's call for an investigation into whether the PM lied to MPs about lockdown parties. Our political correspondent Tom Harwood joins us in the studio.
Yes, and 2/3 of primary school head teachers say they haven't had enough funding to help pupils catch up in school following the disruption caused by COVID. That's what a new report, at least, from the Sutton Trust says. We'll be joined by their CEO to talk about this in much more detail.
Yes, I'm very worried we're losing a generation of kids, frankly. But moving on, happy birthday to Her Majesty the Queen, who turns 96 today. And look at, if you're listening on radio, she stood in between two lovely white horses. But our royal reporter Cameron Walker will be live in Hyde Park, where the Queen will be given a celebratory gun salute at around midday.
Yes, that's all coming up and much more across the programme. And you can get in touch with your views as usual. gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email.
Right, so Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, of course, has arrived in India for his two-day visit aiming to boost business and trade.
Yes, British and Indian businesses are expected to announce investment and export deals worth more than £1 billion, but the announcement could be overshadowed by Labour's call for a Commons committee to investigate whether the Prime Minister lied to MPs about lockdown parties.
Well, speaking to journalists on the plane to India, where he's definitely not running away from his problems, he said that he believes voters would want us all to stop talking about politicians and instead have their politicians get back to changing and improving Britain. And to be honest with you, I think that's possibly fair enough, although he definitely is running away from his problems. Anyway, for more, let's go to our political correspondent, Tom Harwood. Tom, is Boris running away from his problems?
Well, it's interesting that you say that for a fourth time, because this India trip has been such a long time coming. Boris Johnson, when he became Prime Minister, was desperate to get out to India. There was a trip that was actually organised just as COVID seemed to be receding, and then, boom, what was then known as the Indian variant came around, and that trip was cancelled. So this is such a long-delayed trip that many people have been expecting for almost 2 years now. So finally, the Prime Minister is on this. It has to be said, this was organised before the Speaker granted the Leader of the Opposition this motion. The Speaker granted this motion on Tuesday. We saw the wording of the motion yesterday. We saw the wording of the government's amendment to the motion, and this is very important.
Go on, talk us through this. Come on.
So, starting at the beginning, because this is a complicated process, but it does matter because this vote could be very, very pivotal today. The Labour Party want what's known as the Procedure Committee, a very important committee in the House of Commons, one that has power to investigate, to demand evidence. So, for example, were it to investigate the Prime Minister, it could demand all the evidence that's been handed to the Metropolitan Police, the photographs, everything else. It could well make them public. This is a seismic thing. And the Labour Party want this committee to investigate whether or not the Prime Minister knowingly misled Parliament. And that's the key point, because if you knowingly mislead Parliament, you're in breach of the Ministerial Code, and the Ministerial Code calls for people who knowingly mislead Parliament to resign. So that's a very significant point. The government accepts that this committee may well want to investigate this, but says it's the wrong time to do so. The government's amendment to the Labour motion says you need to wait first before the Met Police conclude and the Sue Gray report is published. So what the government is saying is that, fine, this is legitimate, it could go ahead, but not while all these other investigations are going on. Because let's not forget, this would be the third investigation after Sue Gray, after the Met Police, the Procedure Committee now too. So the government is saying, fine, but not yet.
I'm a bit sick of this.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are. How will they determine? I know you, on your show in the mornings just before ours, for a few days actually, you've been saying actually you don't think the Prime Minister necessarily lied about the parties that briefed the Times, I think you'd said, or the Telegraph, about this so-called party. Why would he do that if he thought he was breaking the rules, etc., etc.? How will they determine whether he has knowingly misled Parliament about whether there was him going to those parties? What criteria are they going to use? Because as far as I can see, a lot of them, of course, just want him out.
Certainly, and actually one of the points that Conservative MPs were very worried about was that the chair of the Procedure Committee is a Labour MP called Chris Bryant, and he's been very vocal in attacking the Prime Minister on Twitter. So what the Labour Party did actually yesterday was recuse Chris Bryant recused himself from chairing that committee in the event of this to try and make it easier for this motion to pass. But in terms of how they would go about investigating, they'd be looking at communications, they'd be looking to see if the Prime Minister had used any words like party or had been very obviously in a party situation. But I think the problem here is that the Prime Minister has a relatively strong argument that if it takes a long time for the Metropolitan Police to determine if an event breached the rules in one way or another, was this a work event, was this something more social? If that's very hard and ambiguous to decide, then potentially the Prime Minister has a case.
Yeah, Labour's banging on all the time, aren't they, about police resources and this, that and the other. Why are they so happy to waste them investigating whether or not Boris Johnson ate a slice of raspberry ripple?
Well, I think that there is a considerable public interest case here, looking at polls and looking at the broad temperature of the path of the country.
I'm being facetious, Tom.
And not least looking at the inboxes of MPs and their very angry constituents. There is a legitimate question to ask around all of this, but I think there's also a legitimate case that could be made on the side of the government.
Yeah, well, one of the things that some people are saying we should actually be getting on with speaking about in relation to the Prime Minister, not Partygate, but actually what we're doing in the world, what's going on in the world. And one thing the Prime Minister is doing is visiting India today to negotiate perhaps a trade deal in the works, or an immigration deal even. Can you just tell us a bit more about that?
Well, this is one of the big prizes of Brexit, isn't it? The idea that we can go and strike new free trade agreements with big economies elsewhere in the world. As a member of the European Union, and specifically the European Union's customs union, members of the EU are forbidden from striking their own trade deals. The EU has to do it together. And that means that in some ways the EU can act bit more slowly. It's taken a very long time for the EU to sort of strike these deals. It doesn't have a deal with America. It only recently got one with Japan and Canada. It doesn't have one with Australia. It doesn't have one with India. The UK has now got one with Australia and New Zealand. We're enhancing the EU's one with Canada that we rolled over. And indeed, we're looking to negotiate with India. And there were a number of sticking points that people were bringing up. The Indian government wants, as a part of that trade deal, to liberalise some of the migration provisions. They want us to be willing to take more high-skilled Indian migrants. And it looks like the government is moving on that point. And because we're getting this sort of sense, not least of personal friendship between Boris Johnson and the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, it looks like there could very well be an FTA on the cards, and one by the end of the year, which would be an extraordinary political feat.
Is that something that Boris Johnson is actually very good at and maybe doesn't get quite enough credit for, which is that people, world leaders, do seem to like him? I mean, even when it was kicking off in the Channel with Macron, right? When they actually met up, I think it was the G7, was it? There was that kind of... You can just see the look in each other's eyes where they kind of, I don't know, have a bit of a laugh with each other almost. And is Boris Johnson actually very good in that regard? When he goes to meet other leaders, you know, they think he... I don't know what they think about him, maybe. I suppose maybe they think of him in the way that a lot of people do, but actually they quite like him.
Well, this is one of the great flaws and triumphs of Boris Johnson as a human being, that he is a very clubbable person, that in terms of being... and I know you're smirking there because, of course, what he has been accused of is being too clubbable over the last few years. But clearly, people who meet him, he does have that sort of rock star factor that many politicians in this country don't. People want to take selfies with him.
You want to go for a pint with him?
He cracks a joke. I think many people would think that if you were to pick any previous Prime Minister of the last 100 years, he'd be near the top at a dinner party guest list fantasy table. But yes, it does seem that the Prime Minister has built a relationship with President Zelensky unlike that of basically any other leader in the world. And it does seem that he does get on with Modi. He does get on with ScoMo, Scott Morrison, the Australian Prime Minister. He was able to have a relationship with both President Trump and President Biden, which seems to be an extraordinary feat to bridge that divide. And similarly, I think that is a point that sometimes goes missed. The idea of having a weighty world leader at the not the stern, the helm, at the helm.
I wouldn't know, Tom. I've never been sailing.
I was trying to conjure up a picture of a much bigger...
I do like ports,
ship, if you will. But no, if you're imagining a Prime Minister who has that sort of weight, I know we're giggling because quite frankly, when you're talking about Boris Johnson, it doesn't always seem like it's the most serious thing in the world, and it can make situations lighter, and potentially that's actually a tool for diplomacy.
Yes,
yeah, indeed.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Tom. I did have to try and not burst out. These two are cheeky. That's the problem. It's hard keeping a straight face with these two.
Well done for keeping a straight face.
Interacting, but thank you, Tom, for giving that update.
Tom raised a good point there. Your best dinner party guests from previous Prime Ministers. Right? I think Boris Johnson would be up there. I mean, you've got Churchill. Everyone I've ever met who says that they've been out for dinner with Theresa May, so she's got the personality of a plankton. So, I mean, I imagine that Boris Johnson will probably be better than that. But anyway, moving on.
Yes, we're going to move on to some other stories. But before we do that, I have to say I'm quite upset at one of our viewers or listeners. Jeanette has said the tip to a good cup of tea, don't squeeze the tea bag, which is just a heinous crime in my book.
Don't squeeze the tea bag. What do you mean?
So you just take it. You just scoop the tea bag out and put it in the bin instead of squeezing it.
I don't squeeze it.
You don't squeeze the tea bag. To squeeze or not to squeeze? Let us know, because I think that's that's quite an offence.
Okay.
I squeeze the hell out of tea bags.
Right.
So.
Okay, right. Well, let's take you through some of the headlines now of the day that you might have missed.
Yes, a Welsh blogger has asked for a priceless Welsh artefact to be returned to Wales from the British Museum so that local people could come and see it much easier and regard it as theirs. Are you OK?
No.
OK, well, the mould gold cape, which was found in Flintshire in 1833, has been at the British Museum in London ever since. But Andrew Green says this was on pure accident as there were no public Welsh museums at the time. Meanwhile, the British Museum says it intends to keep the Cape in its collection so that it may be more widely admired by the museum's 6 million annual visitors.
Yeah, plus they acquired this artefact completely legitimately, apparently, unlike some others. So, some stuff about a Welsh Cape there. Right, now, lingerie brand Victoria's Secret has just cast its first ever male ambassador to launch its, here we go, genderless loungewear line, everybody. There we go.
Well, never have I ever starred Darren Barnett.
What the heck is that?
Was a lucky man to get the gig.
It's just a T-shirt.
Victoria's Secret has previously come under fire for its lack of diversity. I'm sure... do they sell male underwear? I don't know. As well as one man, it currently has one plus-size model. Ooh, one plus-size model. And also one transgender model, which it hired in 20...
Am I missing something here?
Yeah, we were just showing pictures for those who are listening to us about this model, this Never Have I Ever, which means absolutely nothing to me. Is that a band or something? But anyway, this person we're showing on screen is the Victoria's Secret's first male model, but in the pictures we're seeing, he's not actually wearing any lingerie. He just looks like he's in a standard...
He's wearing a T-shirt and a hoodie.
Yeah.
I don't understand it because,
but
you know...
do they sell male...
But how is that genderless? I don't understand what makes it genderless. It's a hoodie. You know, it's not uncommon, is it, for people's partners to, you know...
Yeah.
Wear your hoodie or borrow your pyjama top or whatever it is.
Also, what's gender-neutral underwear? I mean, what would that even look
I don't know.
I don't really want to have that picture.
Just boxer shorts, probably. I mean, if that's something to go by, just male underwear that women wear as well. Anyway, right, so obviously that's just absolutely bonkers. But anyway, a London-based tech company says that they've developed a microchip that, when inserted into our hands, can be used to pay for contactless payments. Well, Walletmore says that the chip will be used in conjunction with the Pure Wrist app and will have to be inserted by a specialist surgeon into the hand.
Yes, well, the surgery, however, will last 4 minutes, but be about 7 millimetres deep and cost not too bad, $299, according to the company website. But how much is $299 compared to the cost of never leaving home without your wallet again? Well, I think it's not too... I was expecting a few grand because you're having a surgery... Well, I suppose it's not big surgery if it takes 4 minutes, but
isn't this
how
just
handy is that? You just wave your hand when you're checking out.
Isn't this just part of the never-ending march towards the death of humanity? Because, you know, how inconvenient is it now to just pay for it on your phone or, you know, on your wallet?
Yes, but if you're like me, who leaves things everywhere...
Yeah, I feel it's a bit sinister because what if it gets hacked by a nefarious government and all of a sudden, you know, you start...
there is always that.
You know, that's it. You get defrauded by someone just tapping your wrist.
Your card could get hacked, your bank account could get hacked,
your phone could get hacked. But then when it gets hacked, I have to get a new card. So do you have to get a new chip?
New hand, maybe.
A new hand? Gosh, the mind boggles. Anyway, right, after the break, underfunded teachers are struggling to help pupils catch up on learning missed due to the pandemic. We look into this a lot more after your weather.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest broadcast from the Met Office. Mostly dry on Thursday, plenty of sunshine, but the breeze increasing over the next 24 hours or so. The reason for the settled weather at the moment, low pressure to the south of the UK, high pressure to the north, an easterly flow developing, drawing in quite a lot of dry air at the moment, but we will see changes as we move into the weekend. For Thursday afternoon, plenty of sunshine across the whole of the UK. It will be hazy at times. The easterly breeze just starting to pick up, so noticeable along some eastern coasts. Perhaps some low cloud mist and murk holding on across some eastern coast of northeast England here too. Temperatures pegged back 11, 12, 13 degrees. But come further west, temperatures rising 19, 20 Celsius possible, well above average for the time of year. Moderate UV levels too. Through the evening time, some mist and fog starts to develop in 1 or 2 spots. Low cloud moving back in off the North Sea down the east coast here, so turning murky as the night goes on. That easterly wind also starting to pick up, becoming noticeable by the end of the night. Temperatures generally into mid-single figures, towns and cities holding up well above freezing. So a fresh start to Friday morning, a dry, bright start for many, though low cloud across some eastern areas. The southeast seeing some thicker cloud, this pushing its way westwards through the morning into the afternoon. It should break up, however, we will see showers develop here too. 1 or 2 of these could be heavy as they move into the West Country, though the Midlands northwards, Plenty more sunshine to come, some low cloud around the coast, keeping it cooler across northeast Scotland, eastern England, but elsewhere temperatures again high teens, well above average. Through the evening we should start to see the showers fade away across southwest England, elsewhere generally dry, though notice again some low cloud moving in off the North Sea later on, and that will set us up for the weekend itself. Cloudy for many, the risk of a few showers, the best of the sunshine in the east where we'll see the highest temperatures.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christys.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christys, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Yes, OK, hello everybody. It's about to go 11:26. This is To The Point with me, Patrick Christys and Mercy Moroki on GB News. We're live on your telly, online and radio this morning.
Yes.
And there's a lot happening at the minute,
There's a lot happening in the inbox. A lot of it is to do with tea bags. The tea bags.
Oh, again.
It's this man that's being silly. Now, I said that I squeeze my tea bags. Patrick does not grow up.
Sorry, no, it's fine. I've only just recovered, and now here we are again.
Patrick does not squeeze his tea bags. So a lot of you, surprisingly, have been getting in touch saying whether you squeeze your tea bags or not. And I think most people agree with me that you have to squeeze your tea bags.
Well, Keith certainly agrees with you. Tut, Patrick, you always squeeze the tea bag. You've been living in London far too long. There we go.
Sandy says, you're right, Mercy.
I've got a feeling if we keep up this discussion, I won't be living in London for so much longer, by the way. But anyway, carry on.
You're right, Mercy. Squeeze the hell out of your tea bag, but only a little milk for me, please.
OK.
Squeezing bags depends on the strength of the tea bag and how strong a person likes it and how long it's been
Right, OK, right, just stop this. Thank you, everyone who's been getting in touch. GBViews at GBnews. GBNews.uk. There's a lot going on in the world right now. We're moving on to something a lot more serious.
Yes.
Boris Johnson, well, it's something Boris related anyway, because Tom Howard, our political correspondent, actually joins us now, I believe. Yes, indeed. And Tom, you've got something to fill us in on, haven't you?
Yes, some pretty dramatic happenings in Parliament over the last 5 minutes. Of course, the debate for this Labour motion is to begin in the next couple of minutes. And what has happened? Moments before this debate has begun, the government has dropped its whipping operation. It has dropped its amendment and will be allowing Conservative MPs a free vote on Labour's motion. So the government has stopped putting up a fight, and it is overwhelmingly likely now that the Labour motion will pass.
And remind us what that motion is and what that could actually lead to. You know, what are the consequences of this thing potentially?
Well, this is a motion that would mean the House refers the Prime Minister to the Committee on Privileges. And this committee would be able to conduct a thorough investigation into the Prime Minister as to whether or not he misled the House. Of course, if a minister does mislead the House under the Ministerial Code, that minister must resign. So this is a weighty, weighty thing. Now, on the one hand, it could be that the pressure just got too much for the whips. The Prime Minister is, of course, away at the moment, and so perhaps there's a lack of leadership in the Commons right now. On the other hand, there may well have been a calculation that there is not enough evidence to suggest that the Prime Minister did mislead the House. Indeed, they may well have some evidence to suggest he didn't mislead the House. So in terms of not opposing any longer this Labour motion, we're going to see an investigation, and we will probably see some pretty interesting consequences as to evidence as to whether or not the Prime Minister has lied.
So it would have to be able to directly prove that Boris Johnson knew of a party and or knew fundamentally of something that broke the rules. Which is actually, unless he's put something in writing, which I imagine, well, I mean, goodness only knows actually, but I imagine he hasn't, right? People may have emailed things in his behalf. We heard, didn't we? He was, what was it? Confronted by cake or something? It was one of those ridiculous... Ambushed by a cake.
That was the Minister Conor Burns speaking on television. But the Labour Party's motion references 4 instances in which they want to be investigated. 4 instances of the Prime Minister speaking at the dispatch box in the House of Commons. Firstly, on the 1st of December 2021, where he said, all guidance was followed in number 10. Secondly, on the 8th of December 2021, when he said, I have been repeatedly assured since these allegations emerged that there was no party and that no COVID rules were broken. Again, later the same day, I am sickened myself and furious about that, but I repeat what I have said. I have been repeatedly assured that the rules were not broken. And then finally, 8th of December 2021, the guidance was followed and the rules were followed at all times.
Well, that's his understanding of those rules, isn't it?
Exactly. So is there evidence to suggest that he had thought something different?
Right.
That someone had told him something different? Or that he had reason to believe that guidance hadn't been followed at all times? That's the question. And it is, to be fair, one that is subjective. So it's very hard to adjudicate.
Can I just ask, I mean, if he does get referred to this Standards Committee...
Committee on Privileges.
Committee on Privileges. What would they have the power to compel people to come and give a statement, essentially? Because I'm just thinking back to Allegra Stratton, of course, she resigned over joking about parties. Could somebody like her be called and asked, you know, what did the Prime Minister know about exactly what was going on, about whether people were slyly having parties behind his back? Could that happen?
They can certainly call up witnesses, and that could make for some very, very interesting consequences. But also the powers that committee has to demand evidence are also considerable. Speaking this time yesterday, no one would have assumed that we would get to where we are now. People were thinking that the Labour Party motion would be easily defeated. This is a government, after all, with an 80-seat majority. Finding enough Tory MPs who would not only abstain but vote against their own government was going to be an uphill struggle. So the fact that the Conservative Party has now just stopped opposing altogether. It is the most extraordinary moment. And, of course, I must stress, this is just minutes before that debate was expected to start. The debate will still be starting in around a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
I'm sure we could we'll be able to cut to it as well.
Absolutely. And let me just ask you something, which is one of our viewers or listeners has just emailed in to remind us. They were watching your show earlier, Tom, 9:30, and you had a lawyer on, and apparently he said that the offences at number 10, which is Crown property, were not offences because they were exempted in the regulations. Is that true?
So that's one argument that has been raised. Stephen Barrett, a barrister, had written about it in The Spectator back in December 2021. And it's one argument. It has to be said that a government minister in the Lords has said that they do not treat number 10 as Crown property, that they would say that the rules would have to still be applied. But, for example, if Boris Johnson were to have read The Spectator in December, read that article that said that number 10 was exempted as Crown property, as the palaces are as well, and then thought, well, whatever happened was within the rules, and then he said whatever happened was within the rules. It's a convoluted argument, but it's certainly an argument that the Prime Minister could deploy, although he might not be politically wise in making that argument, because even though it might be true on some technical level, in terms of how it looks, that number 10 was just not legally not forced to follow the rules that everyone else had to follow. Well, that's a very bad look.
It's interesting, actually, because we talk a lot about thought crimes, don't we? And thought police and everything on this show. And actually, essentially, what's potentially being asked to be adjudicated on in this case is what Boris Johnson thought. And that could prove to be very difficult to actually do. Tom, thank you very, very much. Tom Howard there, our political correspondent, who no doubt will be whizzing in and out all day today. It's a busy political day.
Yes, well, as we said there, we will be going to the Commons very shortly. We're expecting that debate to start. Just a reminder, Boris is facing a Commons vote on whether claims he misled MPs over Partygate should be investigated. I think we can start taking a look.
Let's do it now.
My local job centre more frequently and accused me of not visiting it, I think, for about 5 years. It was completely untrue. I'm a regular visitor to the job centre, as I am in other institutions. But the issue it raises with me is one of privilege. Does this mean that the government is now monitoring the visits of members of this House to government departments for use in political debate? Because if that is the case, let me just say I have a brilliant working relationship with my local job centre. The staff work incredibly hard, but most of our communication is via emails and telephones, etc. However, if our visits to government offices are to be monitored, it will no longer be emails or telephones. I'll insist on a meeting at the tax office, the job centre, the border office and every other government agency within my constituency. This is a matter of parliamentary privilege, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like you to look into the matter.
Can I first of all say I thank the honourable gentleman for notice of that point of order. The incident he recounts is indeed surprising, and I have noted that the Leader of the House has heard it. We will leave it there for now, but I will follow up on it. Point of order. Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister's comments on Tuesday night to his backbenchers were briefed to journalists by his spokesperson. Those comments were reasonably interpreted by several media outlets, including the Daily Telegraph, as being criticisms of the Archbishop of Canterbury and the BBC for their comments and coverage of Ukraine. Government ministers were out on broadcast rounds yesterday morning and they didn't seek to correct that interpretation. But, Mr. Speaker, since then, the government has corrected the record and said the Prime Minister's comments only referred to the Archbishop and not the BBC. So I'm more than happy to echo that correction and withdraw my comments of yesterday. Thank you.
Well, that draws a line under that. Right, before we begin, I believe it would assist the House if I remind members of the decision in question and the procedure on this motion. The decision before the House is whether or not to refer the matter to the Committee of Privileges at this time. It will be for the committee to report back on whether it considers there has been a contempt. whilst it is perfectly in order for the honourable members to question the veracity of the Prime Minister's responses to the House cited in the motion, it is not in order to challenge more generally the truthfulness of the Prime Minister or any other honourable or right honourable member. Good temper, moderation must be maintained in parliamentary language, much of which we might be said today has already been said in response to the Prime Minister's statement on Tuesday. Previous debates on such motions have relatively short. Since 2010, the longest such debate has been for 1 hour and 29 minutes, and debates have been as short as 7 minutes. That said, an amendment has been selected, and this motion of great importance. The debate may continue for as long as it takes, unless either a successful closure to bring the debate to an end or we reach 5 o'clock, in which case the debate will be adjourned to a future day. I would also say, if it begins to become very repetitive, we then may have to consider whether to do a closure earlier, but I will leave that on how the debate develops. Any members wishing to speak need to stand to ensure they catch my eye and be at the beginning of this debate. So, the Right Honourable Member for Holborn and St Pancras has tabled a motion for debate on the matter of privilege, which I have agreed should take precedence today. I inform the House that although I have selected the amendment in the name of the Minister for the Cabinet Office, I understand it is now the intention of the Government not to move that amendment. So now we will start by calling Keir Starmer to move the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the motion in my name and the other names on the order sheet for today. Mr. Speaker, the motion I've tabled seeks to defend the simple principle that honesty, integrity and telling the truth matter in our politics. That is not a principle that I or the Labour Party have a special claim to. It's a British principle. It's a principle that's been cherished by Conservatives for as long as their party has existed, embraced by Unionist and Nationalist parties alike, and one that still guides members from every political party in this House. But I will.
The opposition leader giving way. I lost my mother to COVID in the first lockdown. It was a very painful experience because she was in a hospital bed. We obeyed the rules. We could not be by her side when she passed. I have made my disquiet known to the Prime Minister a couple of times now, and he has taken that on board. I am deeply unhappy at the way Number 10 has performed over this period in question. But what I would suggest to the Right Honourable Member is that it's perfectly natural in this country that you weigh all the evidence before deciding on intent, because the central issue here is whether the Prime Minister misled Parliament. Would he agree that, in us all accepting that it should be referred to the Privileges Committee, that committee needs to weigh all evidence before coming to a decision, and that includes the Sue Gray report?
Can I just say to others, interventions are meant to be short. What I would say, and I do say to us, if you're intervening and you are on the list, you will go aloud. I know the honourable member's not, and obviously wouldn't want to now he's made his speech. Here's
Can I just first say I'm sorry for the loss within your family, and we all send our condolences. I know how difficult it has been for so many during this difficult period. In relation to the substantive intervention, just 2 points, and I'll develop them later. The first is there is already a case before the House that's very clear. The Prime Minister said no rules were broken. 50 fines for breaking the rules and the law have already been issued. So there's already a reasonable case. But under the motion, because I do understand the sentiment behind the intervention, if the motion is passed, the committee will not begin their substantive work until the police investigations are complete. so that they will have all of that evidence before them, one way or the other, in order to come to a view. And I think that's within the body of the motion, and that's the right way and the way it should work. And I hope that does address the concerns that have been raised. I will.
I thank you for giving way. And further to that point of the honourable gentleman across the way, many of us in the chamber have lost loved ones over the last period of time, and we feel greatly aggrieved that we haven't had the opportunity to have our day in court, if that's the way to put it. Perhaps we do feel the need to have justice seen for all those who have lost loved ones, those who passed away and who we miss greatly. Does the right honourable gentleman feel, when it comes to justice, while we do need to see all of the evidence, there also, at the end of that day, has to be accountability in this process, and accountability means people have to answer for what their actions have been?
Well, again, can I express my sadness at the loss that he and his family have endured? And I was struck particularly just a few months ago in the way that he spoke about that in this House. I think we all were. But on the substantive point, and this is really the point of the motion, this is about honesty, integrity and telling the truth in this place. And it's an important principle, and it's one we all share. As I say, I'm not claiming this as a Labour Party principle. It is a principle that we all share because we know the importance of it. That's why it's a matter for the House to consider. But it is a principle under attack because the Prime Minister has been accused of repeatedly, deliberately and routinely misleading this House over parties held in Downing Street during lockdown. Now, that's a serious allegation, because if it's true, it amounts to contempt of Parliament. And it's not, and it should never be, an accusation that is made lightly. And nor should we diminish the rights of members to defend each other from that accusation. But the Prime Minister's supporters don't seek to do that. Instead, many of them seek to simply dismiss its importance. They say there are worse crimes. He didn't rob a bank. He only broke the rules for 10 minutes. It was all a long time ago. Every time I will in just a moment. Every time one of these arguments is trotted out, the status of this House is gradually eroded, and our democracy becomes a little weaker. Because the convention that Parliament must not be misled, and that in return we don't accuse each other of lying, are not curious quirks of this strange place. They're fundamental pillars on which our constitution is built. And they're observed wherever parliamentary democracy thrives. With them, our public debate is elevated. When members assume good faith on behalf of our opponents, we can explore, test, interrogate our reasonable disagreements about how we achieve our common goals. Because ultimately, no matter which benches we sit on, no matter which whip we follow, fundamentally we are all here for one reason: to advance those common goals of the nations, of the peoples that make up our United Kingdom. And I give way.
Grateful to the Leader of the Opposition for giving way. And he mentioned some of the arguments around, well, it was just 9 minutes. Well, I met a woman who was a daughter of a serviceman. He lost his life the week before that birthday party. And she said to me, what I wouldn't give for just 9 more minutes with him. I congratulate him on the way he's rising above party politics here, but to just diminish 9 minutes as just anything, it diminishes us all across both sides of this House. Would you not agree?
Well, I'm grateful for that intervention because it goes to the heart of the matter, because some have tried to suggest that a short period or there's some equivalence between these penalty notices and speeding, and that just doesn't understand the enormity of the difference. It's very rare that the whole of the nation goes through something together, a trauma together that was COVID. And there were the awful cases of funerals, of weddings that were missed, of parents who didn't see the birth of their children. And they're awful cases. But I think almost every family was marked during this period, including my own, by things that we didn't do that we would have liked to have done, usually visiting elderly parents, seeing children. And there was a huge sense of guilt that we didn't do it, including in my own family. Guilt that because we followed the rules, we didn't do what we thought was actually right by our elderly relatives. And that's why it hurts so much. And that's why anybody trying to say this is just like a speeding ticket doesn't understand what this goes to politically and emotionally. And I will in just one moment, but just going back to the principles, because I want this debate to be about the principle, because I think this is where the debate should be. The committee will be charged if this motion goes through in determining actually whether there was any misleading. But this is about the principles that we all care about. And that's why I actually think that everybody should simply vote for this motion this evening to uphold those principles. Because those principles, that we don't mislead the House, and in return we don't call each other liars in this House, they ensure, I will in just a minute, they ensure that we make good decisions and avoid bad ones. It's what makes our democracy grow in ways that reflect the hopes and tackle the fears of those that we represent. It's what makes our democracy thrive. It's what makes this House thrive. It's what makes Britain thrive. And Mr. Speaker, we don't have to look far to see what happens when that faith is lost and there is no hope of reason resolving disagreements. When nations are divided, when they live in different worlds where their own truths and their own alternative facts, democracy is then replaced by an obsession with defeating the other side. Those we disagree with become enemies. The hope of learning and adapting is lost. Politics becomes a blood sport rather than a quest to improve lives. A winner-takes-all politics where inevitably everyone loses out. I will give way, and then I'll give way to Hunt.
The Leader of the Opposition was big-hearted enough to say earlier that he unwittingly misled the House. I'm sure you'd agree with me that it's very important that we stick with the convention that we don't call each other liars. There's a good reason for that. 2 of our colleagues have been killed. There's been a lot of attacks on colleagues. So in this debate, can we just accept that everybody here is an honourable member, and when they speak here, they may unwittingly mislead the House, but they think that they were, for instance, abiding with the rules. So can we tone down the whole nature of this debate?
Thank you for that intervention, and I will try to keep within those parameters and elevate this to the principle that we're actually discussing today, which is the principles that we apply when we're debating in this chamber. I will give way behind.
I'm very grateful to my right friend for giving way, and also for what he's said about the fact that we don't on this side have a monopoly on truth. I think it's a very important point that he's made there. But does he agree with me that there's something really fundamental about this, and that is whether we, as members of Parliament, are fit to hold these powers that we have in terms of holding people to account, or whether the politics will always get in the way. And it was very disturbing to hear that because there was a Labour chair, Conservative members might vote against it, and that's very disappointing. The honourable member for Rwanda felt he had to step down. But that principle that either we have an independent or we do it ourselves is very important here.
Well, I'm grateful for that intervention, and it is very important. We do have these procedures to hold us all to the rules of this House, and it's very important that they are applied in the right way, with the right principles. I will give way, because I said I would once more and then again here.
I'm grateful to him for giving way. He's making a very powerful speech. On the point of procedures, I wonder if you would agree with me that there is a bigger point here about Parliament's governance structures, that our whole system of checks and balances is completely out of date. It is beyond ludicrous that the arbiter of whether or not the ministerial code has been broken is the person who's accused of breaking it, in this instance the Prime Minister. Does he agree with me that we also need a wider look at those governance structures, which at the moment are simply not fit for purpose?
Absolutely. For that intervention, because I do think it's a very serious point, because a lot of our conventions and rules and traditions are based on the principle of honour, and that people members of this House wouldn't, other than inadvertently, mislead the House. And that's why the rules are set, but they're set on that proposition. And if there is a member of this House, whoever that is, that doesn't abide by those principles, those honourable principles, then that tests or stress tests the rules that we have. I'll take one more intervention and then I will give way.
I understand completely the position the honourable gentleman opposite said about toning down the rhetoric. I completely understand that. But let me just. I understand that position, but let me make this point, because I know the honourable gentleman over the years. We can't tone down the seriousness of this matter. Yes. I was in the Prime Minister's constituency earlier this week. It's the neighbouring constituency to mine, the London Borough of Hillingdon. We're campaigning in the elections. And yeah, there is some shift in vote from Tory to Labour because of this issue, but that isn't the significant issue. The significant was the number that we were finding totally disillusioned now, who'd had enough of this system, were blaming the system itself. That's what we're fighting for here. This is what we're campaigning for here. We're campaigning to restore the credibility in the democratic processes of our country.
And I'm grateful for that intervention. I think it's a really important and powerful point, because if we don't pass this motion, if we don't take this opportunity to restate the principles, then we are all complicit in allowing these standards to slip. We're all complicit in allowing the public to think we're all the same, nobody tells the truth, there are alternative sets of facts. I will in 1 minute. I've given away a lot and I do want to make some progress, but I'll try and come back to the honourable member. But because the conventions... I'll make some progress and I'll try to come back to people where I can. The conventions and the traditions that we are debating this morning are not an accident. They've been handed down to us as the tools that protect Britain from malaise, from extremism and from decline. And this is important because the case against the Prime Minister is that he has abused those tools. That's the case against him, that he's used them to protect himself rather than our democracy, that he's turned them against all that they are supposed to support. And members opposite know that the Prime Minister has stood before this House and said things that are not true. Correct. Safe in the knowledge that he will not be accused of lying, because he can't be. He stood at the dispatch box and point blank denied rule breaking took place, when it did. Yeah. And he did so. As he did so, he was hoping to gain extra protection from our good faith that no Prime Minister would ever deliberately mislead this House. Yep. He's used our faith, our conventions, to cover up his misdeeds. Because, I'll just finish this point, because after months of denials, of absurd claims that all the rules were followed, of feigned outrage.
OK, all right, well, that was Keir Starmer. Indeed, it still is Keir Starmer in the Commons there, just discussing the latest on the Partygate debate. We are going to be returning to that very, very shortly, but we're also, after this short break, going to be going to the Queen's gun salute. Happy birthday, Your Majesty. It's live in Hyde Park, so stay tuned, everybody.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christys.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.